Welcome to the Art Colony, a podcast about art and art history in Provincetown. My name is Gaston Lacombe. When you're an artist, you are often told that you need to develop your own unique style, your own specific vision, a way for people to look at a piece of art and go, oh yeah, of course, this is by so-and-so. Many artists struggle with this, wondering how their work will ever stand out. And it's a question I get often. How did you develop your artistic style? My answer is that your style is rarely something that you consciously choose. Rather, it's something that organically emerges through years of work, practice, experimentation, and failures. It's less of a decision and more of a long-term journey. I bring this up today because of all the artists in our Provincetown Art Colony, our guest today probably has the clearest, most definite style of all. When her pieces are on exhibit, we never even have to look at the label. It's clear right away who is the artist behind this work. The look is unique, original, fascinating, and inimitable. So let's welcome today to the Art Colony podcast, as part of our Artist at Work series, the incomparable Sian Robertson. Hi, Sian.
Hi, that was quite an introduction.
Well, I truly believe it. I feel you're one of the most unique artists we have around here.
Thank you.
So let's start. Who is Sian Robertson?
Going way back, I was born in Southwest Wales in the UK. Came to America in the early 1990s. Ended up staying. Came to the Outer Cape in 1999 and have been here ever since.
And what do you do?
Well, you've caught me at a very transitional part of my life right now because I'm just leaving my job at the Provincetown Independent, where I've been the bookkeeper since just after their first edition, so about 6 years. The job has grown more than I can really commit to, and it feels like the right time to leave. And I'm going to start dedicating myself completely just to art making and things like teaching classes and sort of other like art adjacent types of activities.
So if we go back to the very beginnings, the very origins in southwestern Wales, you said?
Southwest Wales, yes.
Southwest Wales. Okay. Tell us more about those origins.
I was always a really crafty kid. Like my favorite gifts for like Christmas and birthdays were those sort of box kits you get with like every single thing you need to make whatever is on the cover, like, you know, the cork beer mats, and they would have the little stencils and the paints and the paintbrushes and like everything. You could just make these great craft items, and, you know, at the age of like 6. And I loved all those kinds of things. So I was always cutting up things. I was always cutting up magazines and making collages and putting like disparate seeming items together, like playing with the scale and, you know, having little tiny people and huge, enormous animals or something. I was always cutting things up.
So the art of collage, which is, I guess, what we identify you with, so that's from the very beginnings.
I think so, yeah. When I look back on my childhood, I loved doing those kinds of things.
Have you kept any of those?
Not really.
No? You don't have an archive of all of your childhood work?
No, my dad's probably got a few things because he does tend to keep things like that. So I know for a fact he's got one of those little coffee mat things, drink mats. So mostly they're just in my memory.
And then how did you end up on the Cape?
Oh, my husband Nick and I came here on a honeymoon and instantly were like, whoa, this place is great. We need to move here. So we were living in San Francisco at the time. It took about 5 or 6 years or something before we actually managed to, but then we did.
Wow.
And I really wouldn't have considered myself an artist at that time at all. I was sort of creative and would, you know, make holiday cards or things like that. And I really think that moving to Provincetown is what made me realize that I was and that I could be, and that was a valid and celebrated option out here.
So at what point do you think you said, well, I guess I am an artist?
I think what happened was I had friends here. I was very friendly with Sally Brophy and Connie Hatch. And I remember one day, one of them inviting us to their show at a gallery. And I was like, I don't even understand what that means. Like, what do you, like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, I make these things and then I sell them in the gallery and come and see the show. And it was really mind blowing to me that like people that I knew did that. Like artists seemed to be something totally not reachable, or like it just didn't occur to me that ordinary people could be one. And I rapidly learned in Provincetown, like lots of people are. You know, you go to shows at Pam and like, you know, the guy who sells t-shirts at the shop next door, or, you know, pours your beer in the Crown and Anchor or something. Like they're all like, you'd see their names in members' shows. And it's like, oh, that's amazing. Like all these people have these other lives, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing how this place really inspires people to develop their artistic instincts and
Yeah.
tendencies.
I think so.
And yeah, you're completely right. You go to these shows and you go, I didn't know you painted. I
Right.
didn't know you sculpted.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's all our friends, all our neighbors, almost everybody somehow taps into
Mhm.
these abilities.
Yeah.
So
And of
what-
course, there's other things like, you know, acting and singing and musicians and those kinds of arts as well. But
Absolutely.
yeah, everybody has a second life here, I feel like,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, right now at the theater, we're in the holiday season right now.
Mhm.
There's an interpretation of the Christmas Carol at the theater, and it's all local people on
Mhm.
stage, and there's about 30 of them. A
Right.
lot of them I didn't know at all that they
Yeah.
had this talent.
Yeah.
So when did you start actually showing what you're making?
Well, I really started at PAM, the Art Association. I became a member there and just started putting pieces in member shows. And, you know, it's thrilling the first time you get into a juried show, which was quite a few times of trying. And the very first piece of art I ever sold was in a PAM 12 by 12 auction in sort of like 2008 or 9 or something like that. And that was just so exciting. That was the first time anyone had ever paid any money for my art. So that was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sort of carried on, you know, I just sort of had a commitment to always entering everything that they had. And I sort of started to get on people's radar a little bit.
So I said at the beginning that the art of Sian Robertson is very unique and very recognizable. So if somebody has not seen your art yet, how would you describe it?
Currently, really what I do is I cut up maps and sort of layer them in a sort of abstract way between pieces of acrylic and sort of maybe have several layers. I mount them on panels. Some of the acrylic is hanging off the edges, so you get really interesting shadows. And it doesn't sort of feel really quite like collage. The trouble with collage is you need glue, and glue is just such a pain because it's never really cooperative. So this way that I've developed of cutting them and then sandwiching them between the pieces of acrylic and holding it together just tightly with a screw, it's just held in there with the pressure. So I don't need to use glue. So that's great.
Now, when you say cutting up, let's be clear here. We're not just taking scissors and making
No.
squares. And
No.
so tell us how you're cutting them up.
Well, essentially what I do is I cut out the spaces between the roads or the rivers or the lines, whatever features are on the map. I cut out the spaces between them. Sometimes I'll cut away other areas to heighten the sort of focus on whatever it is I'm focused on. Sometimes I'll just literally cut away all the white spaces and leave all the colorful things there. I sort of have just a sort of instinct of what I want to keep and what I want to cut away. Like I'll look at a map and I'll have an idea and I'll be like, oh yes, I'll do this and I'll do that. And I'll cut away these pieces that are going to go on the edges. And then sometimes it evolves quite a bit as I'm doing it. And I suddenly decide, oh yeah, no, all these bits need to go because of whatever reason.
It ends up looking almost like lace.
Yeah, it's very much like lace, very
Yeah.
fragile.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why it's great that they are protected between these pieces of acrylic. And when I first started doing that, they were in books, and I had the whole book, but with all the pages left inside. So each page was like a piece of lace.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of interesting how that evolved because, you know, I had sort of collage background that we were talking about, and I sort of gravitated towards using maps, but in a very narrative way. And so I had a lot of narrative work that I would use appropriate colors of maps to make, a person's face and their clothing and maybe the tree they're standing next to, stuff like that. And I sort of started getting a bit disenchanted with the narrative. And I was at a party one day and someone said to me, "Oh, well, what do you do when you're stuck and you don't know what?" And I said, "Well, I take a page of the London A to Z, which is a sort of a book of London with these yellow and orange maps in. It's very famous. And when I lived in London, you don't leave the house without it because we didn't have Google Maps at that time. So it's the only way to get around. And so it's always been my favorite map. So I would tear a page out and cut the spaces out between the roads. That would kind of get me in the zone. And then I would make the art. And I happened to say that was my favorite thing to do. This person I was talking to, he said, "Well, if that's your favorite thing to do, why don't you just do that?" And I had no answer. And I went home, and the next day I got a book, an A to Z book, and cut all the spaces out between the roads, but left the pages intact. So the cutting board would just go behind each page. It was transformative. I was like, "Oh, right, this is it. I'm not doing any narrative stuff again." So I just saw, I don't know, something in that material that just made me want to take my X-Acto knife to it constantly.
Yeah, so what is your relationship with maps?
I was very young when my dad taught me to map read. He's big into maps. And so he taught me to map read when I was probably too young to actually read the words. But I knew what all the little symbols meant on British maps. There's tons of symbols that tell you not just there's a church on the corner, but whether or not it's got a spire or a tower or neither, different symbols for each of them. And so when we were away from home, he would point to where we were. And I knew where we lived because it was this little peninsula and we lived right on the end of it. So I knew I could find that on a map. And I would sort of navigate us home. And it was thrilling to sort of say, "You're going to turn left around the next corner after the church with the spire." And then you come around the corner and there's the church and you turn left and you're still heading towards home. That just seemed amazing to me, that people have plotted the world out that way.
Yeah.
Even when I was really young, maybe, I don't know, 6 or something like that. So I just have always been really fascinated with them. I love looking at them, and I've always sort of kind of collected them in I'll do something with that one day type of thing, not in a sort of a treasure kind of way, just in it's a great souvenir from a vacation or something. I'd sort of rather have that than a magnet or whatever,
Well, that's one thing I was also wondering, if you're working with maps that have some sort of emotional connection. You were saying a souvenir from a vacation. If you're working with maps that represent times in your life or vacations, or do you have emotional attachments to these maps?
Rarely, yes. It's sort of like a bonus, I guess, if it's oh, look, that's just where I lived in London, or where I grew up in Wales, or that great vacation I had in Spain, or something like that. But I'm really driven by the colors and the shapes and the lines. So it's really about the nuts and bolts aesthetics of the map that really draws me in.
And I find it really interesting that the art of reading maps is getting lost now.
Yeah, definitely.
When I was a child, for me, it was the same. It was very important to follow along on the map. My parents would take us on road trips.
Yeah.
I'm from Eastern Canada. There's a lot of small provinces there, or we would go to New England or whatever. And I always needed to follow on the map. I needed to know where we were.
Same.
And nowadays, you just put the GPS on and the work is done for you. But you sort of lose the ability to read these documents that still exist.
Yeah. Yes, I think so. I mean, there is no need for people to learn how to read them now. I don't know. I just have this great affinity for them and just really love how they look, what they represent. Sometimes I get annoyed because people are like, "Oh, that is a beautiful piece of art. I'd totally buy it if it was New York, but it's not. It's Boston or something, or London or whatever." And I'm like, "But you just said it was so beautiful." Who cares where it is? So people care where it is a lot more than I do.
Yeah. So other people have the emotional attachment.
Definitely.
Even if you don't.
Definitely. And so sometimes I'll make a piece that I think is beautiful because of the way I've, laid them out and whatever. And they'll zero right in on the fact that their childhood home happens to be right in the middle of the map or is visible or where they went to school or college or something like that. People buy them for different reasons than I make them.
And do you have people bringing maps to you and say, make art with this for me?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. And people give me their maps. Like, I just, sometimes I'll come home and there's a box on my doorstep. I've got all kinds of really amazing maps from other people. I mean, I buy them on eBay because they have to be used. That's my rule. So people offload their maps. I mean, they're not useful as a navigational device anymore because they're, 60 years old or something. So,
true. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, the landscape has changed. The cities have changed. What else are they useful for except making art? That's what I feel. And then I love the idea that like of one, say, a 1948, National Geographic map of Washington, D.C. or something. There's probably thousands and thousands and thousands of them were printed. And then somehow one ends up with me and I cut it up and make it into art. And I just think, wow, this one's got this special life that is different from all the others that were printed.
Probably a lot of them ended up being recycled or starting a fire.
Yeah,
I had a lot of these National Geographic maps when I was a kid. My parents didn't have a subscription, but my mother's coworker was getting National Geographic. And at the end of every year, she'd give us a box with all of this year's National Geographics. I loved them. Yeah. And I really loved going through the maps as well. You're going to see I'm a map nerd too.
Yeah.
When I finished high school, what I asked as a gift was an atlas. I wanted to have a world atlas. That's the gift I wanted. And I also was a geography teacher for a while.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
I worked for 4 years in a high school in Latvia as a geography teacher. Oh. And back then, we still didn't have the internet the way we have it now. So we were using paper maps.
Yes. Yeah. I find it really fascinating sometimes. I'll get so distracted in the maps, especially if it's a place I'm familiar with or like a world atlas that's really old. And you can see like, well, that country doesn't exist anymore, or that border has moved, or it's just got a different name now, or now this is the capital city. That used to be the capital city. I didn't know that, It's amazing. I mean, they change, the world changes all the time geopolitically and geographically too, with like, rising tides and borders are changing and coastlines are changing. And it's really quite fascinating.
Do you include that in your art, making statements about it at all?
Not really. I'm really just about the aesthetics.
You're about the shapes and the colors?
I really am. I really am. I mean, it's sort of a bonus if there's some kind of intention where I've specifically looked at like borders or something like that, but the borders have to look cool on the map for me to cut them out in the first place. So it's sort of the aesthetics is where it starts, and then sometimes there's an extra part of it, but usually I'm just isolating a particular part of the map or several particular parts of the maps.
Now, maps come printed on all different types of paper. Some of them are flimsy, some of them are thicker, some of them are glossy. Are you picky about the type of paper you're working with?
Little bit, yeah. The glossy isn't great, most because it fades more easily. I will use it if I just think it's really an interesting map. I always put a note on the back of my art telling people not to put it in direct sunlight because it's not, it is paper, it will fade. So I sort of steer away from the glossy ones if I can. And I don't like those new sort of like, they're almost like plastic, which is great if you're on vacation and it's raining or something and you still got to find your way around Lisbon or something like that. But they are not as satisfying to cut. I derive great satisfaction from the sort of the feeling and the sound of the knife going through the paper. And really that just needs to be just regular old paper to make that, there's a slight drag to it. It sort of sounds weird, but I always feel like I can feel the sound of it going through and I can hear the feeling of it going through. It's like the sound and the sort of visceral nature of cutting it is very connected. I like that very much. And certain papers don't give you that. So
tell us about the technical part of doing this. You're saying you're cutting the paper. So it's not with scissors. You work with an X-Acto
an
knife, right?
X-Acto knife,
So
yeah.
let's say you're given a map right now.
Right.
What's your process?
Well, what I'm doing now basically is I'll take a large-ish area of a map and put that on a panel. And then all the other areas will be cut into smaller pieces. I order acrylic from a company who will cut them to whatever size I want. And they'll put holes in them so that the screws can go in. So then...
You mean the plexiglass?
Yeah, the plexiglass.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll have lots of them in my studio, different sizes, different shapes. And I'll just sort of play around with, I really want to keep this piece of map quite large. These pieces can be smaller. And I'll just sort of just generally figure out how the whole piece is going to be. And then I'll start cutting them. And I cut away whatever part of it I've made an aesthetic choice to cut away. And then I'll layer them. There can be 5 or 6 layers with acrylic between them, so you can sort of see all the way through. And then sometimes there'll be a part of the city or the country or an aesthetic thing that, for whatever reason, I want to show. And maybe I cut a less exciting part that would be covering it. And I just sort of play back and forth and cut more. And I'll always use pieces that are a little bit bigger than the acrylic. So I've got a bit of maneuverability to, I'll just, move this over just a half an inch and then that thing underneath will show after all. And there's a lot of back and forth until you kind of make a final decision and cut it to size and put the screws through the holes which hold it tight, and then they go into the panel as well. So you get all these layers sort of on top, and some of them are hanging off the edge.
What you're describing sounds like a very meditative process.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Yes. Once I've made a decision that I've got this maybe, 8x8 piece and I'm going to cut away all the spaces between the roads, I just sit down and do that. And that could take 2 hours, and depending on how tiny the roads are and how careful you have to be.
Do you ever work with fantasy maps?
I would if they were on paper, sure, yeah.
Because there's all these maps that are created about, the Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth and all this stuff.
Yeah, I think that they wouldn't have enough like roads or geographical features that I could specifically cut around, but I'd certainly have a go at it. Yeah, I haven't really ever done that. Sometimes maps I get do have a lot of pictures on them, vehicles or mountains or, a museum or things like that. So I quite often try and keep those in there.
Yeah, and on antique maps, often that's the valuable part, the cartouches they have, where they have these little drawings or they have little paintings. My ex-husband's father was a map collector, so I have all these connections with maps. And he was collecting maps specifically from the Baltic area.
Oh.
And he had maps going back to the 1400s, the 1300s even, from the Baltic area. And most of the time, the value of the map was determined by the art that was painted on, the pictures that was painted on.
Yes. Yeah, those kind of things are beautiful. Yeah.
Mhm.
I probably wouldn't want to cut one of those kind of pieces.
No, those maps are
if it
too
was
valuable.
all tatty and someone had used it to get around Latvia on their vacation, then that's fine,
Yeah, of course. And do you ever create your own maps?
No.
No?
No, I haven't. No, I don't. I really don't know what to do with a paintbrush or a pencil. Like, I'm just useless with it. I have amazing admiration of people who can paint, and I just don't know what to do with it. But
So
I'm
for you, it's
really good with the knife.
So for you, it's really about sort of the geometry of the product and how you can extract all that's unnecessary to keep the essential part that becomes the art.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes, and the color. It's the colors, the shapes, and the lines. That's really what I'm about. And when I say color, it could be black and white too, or just monochromatic. Like, I love a monochromatic map too, but that's just another color.
And I've seen also that you work with stamps.
Yes, I do. So then I have sort of a whole other thing harkening back to my collage, roots, which is that I make what I call postage portraits, which are, it's a magazine body, a postage stamp head, and then some sort of background that or makes a little story. And I generally do those at this time of year, and I have a booth at the Canteen Holiday Market. And I love doing them because they're sort of, they're quicker and easier, and they're, much more price appropriate, and they're sort of frivolous, but they're also kind of charming.
They absolutely are.
And I love
Yeah.
doing them. So it's great to be in a place like this where you can have, a really big cut up map piece on the walls of, Pam or the Commons. I just dropped a piece there for the show that's opening on Friday.
I did too.
Yes, I saw your piece there.
Yeah, thank you.
And also I can be, getting really cold at the outdoor market behind the canteen at the same time. And that's just making it work out here as an artist, really.
So when I see your pieces with stamps, and I own a few of them, I imagine that you look at the stamp and you try to imagine a whole story. And then you recreate that story on this little 6x6, 8x8 board. Is that what's happening?
Sort of. First of all, I make the stamps fit on the bodies. So I cut a whole lot of bodies out of magazines, and I have a whole lot of stamps. So then it's important to me that the stamp somewhat looks like it fits on the body.
And these are authentic stamps.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Everything has to be used. Like they're all used stamps. They're all... they've either arrived to me, or people know now that I collect these things, or sometimes I'll buy on eBay, a bag of 100 people head stamps, used stamps, because, I'm running out or something. You can only do so many with Queen Elizabeth. Thank goodness now we have Charles. I do have my first Charles stamp now, but so I'll make the people. So there's all these bodies I've cut out. There's all these stamps I've got, and I'll sort of play around. Okay, this one of the queens, she's facing this direction. It's quite small, so I need to look at the small bodies and just sort of match them up. So I'll make all the people, and then there's a sort of a little dance back and forth between the people and the potential backgrounds. Because sometimes I'll look at one and he's dressed, he's a chef. And so it's like, okay, I've got lots of old cookbooks. I'll find, look, he's holding a big cleaver or something. So let's go to the pages about how to chop up meat or something like that. Or sometimes the person in the head maybe was a chef and the body isn't like that. He's hiking or something. So now it's like, oh, he's escaping from being a chef on his day off or something like that. So then, I'll find a map of like some hikes or something like that. So there's a big sort of back and forth. Or sometimes I'll have a really cool piece of map or page from a drawing book or a whatever kind of ephemera I've got. And I'll think, well, what kind of person would be on this? Maybe I've got a great book with these sort of 60s drawings of people, how to like paint your house and decorate your house and build furniture and things. So I'm like, oh yeah, where's that man with the paintbrush? Where's that person I've already made? And he's got a paintbrush, So I'll put him on that background because it seems right. And sometimes it's just aesthetic, not necessarily an actual story. Just, I don't know. I just like the way the colors work, the color of the background with the color of the body and the color of the stamp. And it doesn't really mean anything.
Well, then we can imagine our own meaning.
Yes. Whoever buys it can make their own story. That's totally fine too.
Well, one of those that I have from you at home, it's Henry VIII.
Oh.
That's the stamp. And he has a body, but the body also has a goat. It's holding a goat. And it's like and I think the background is a map of Switzerland.
Right.
So it's Henry VIII walking a goat in Switzerland.
Yeah. What's wrong? That seems perfectly ordinary.
And another one is, the stamp is Audrey Hepburn. And she has this very classy, very Audrey Hepburn-like body, and she's pouring tea. And I don't remember exactly what's on the background. But you look at these little scenes, and you can imagine almost a whole little short story or novel coming from these. Yeah. So if you haven't seen them yet, I'm talking to the listeners right now. If you haven't seen it yet, you can go to the Christmas market at the
Yeah.
canteen right now. For those of you listening in real time, we are in the holiday season, and you currently have a booth at Canteen's Holiday Market, right?
Yes. So it's every weekend from from Thanksgiving through Holly Folly, both of which we've already had. But then the next 3 weekends plus New Year's Eve. So the market is open and it's great. There's like 26 vendors there, all kinds of different arts and crafts. Really, really, it's really fun. It's really fun. And then the canteen does a great job with, holiday drinks and festive food, and they have fire pits out there, and it's really great. It's like a little magic spot on Commercial Street that you just don't know is there, and it's right behind the canteen.
Yeah, and it's attracting a lot of people.
Yeah.
So if you want a really cool, fun gift to give to someone where they can invent little stories in their mind about the people on the stamps and what they're doing, Sean has really wonderful work there.
Thank
But
you.
that's an interesting concept because you create the work, but then people will interpret them however they want. How do you feel about that?
I'm fine with it. I mean, if sometimes that's just like a sort of a fourth dimension to the pieces where somebody brings their particular experience, like with the postage stamps, maybe, their mom loved Audrey Hepburn and now this is just really speaking to them of their mom. Or the map work, somebody had some great vacation there or their house is on it, like I said before, or something like that. And it's almost like completing it. The map started with somebody that I don't know. And then I do all this stuff to it and make it into this piece of art. And then somebody buys it or hopefully buys it. And they, for whatever reason, it's spoken to them for some reason. And usually it's more than just the aesthetics of it. Usually it's something else, some sort of connection they've got with the place. So it sort of feels like a full circle thing.
Well, I've always felt that whenever I go to one of your shows, it sort of triggers a lot of conversation. It makes people happy also. Somehow looking at these maps and trying to find all these little details and following all the lines, people really lighten up when they do that.
Yeah.
Because you just had recently a show at the Cad Red Gallery with Andrea Sawyer. And everybody was 6 inches away from the art trying to find all the details and looking in. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. It is. And yes, people do see different things in there from what I saw. So I love that about them.
Where do you show your art?
I don't. I just have it. I have it wherever. Andy invited me to have a show and I was like, sure, yes, I'll have one. And I'm hoping to have a show at the Commons next year. I've applied for one, and I have been in the past represented. I got my start at Adam Peck Gallery.
That's where I first saw your work.
Which was amazing. I mean, Adam and Marion were I was so fortunate to start with them. They just really nurtured me and treated me as an artist. And, that was the first time that had ever really happened to me, and spoke to me about like, how, why do you do this and what's that and what's this about? And it was a huge education for me to be there. So that was a fantastic start. But I also like being kind of a free agent and being able to, I've had shows at Gallery 444, which you can rent. People invite me to be part of a group show or something. And and I just say yes to everything.
And then last year, you had a residency at 20 Summers.
I did, yeah.
Tell us about that.
That's the best thing I've ever done. I was so, I just loved doing that. So basically, they gave me the Hawthorne Barn, which, has this amazing history in the artist world of Provincetown and the Outer Cape. And they gave it to me for 3 days. So I had 1 day to set it up. And then 1 day with like open houses, and then, people could just come and visit me there. And then the second day they could do that. And then there was a talk that evening, and then we took it down. So it took me months and months and months to make the thing that I did. And I did all the cutting of the maps, but I had people help me install it because, the beams are very high up and I'm really short. And so it took 4 of us to install it. But
can you describe to us the artwork you had created for that space?
Yeah, so I used the London A to Z, which again is my favorite. And I used, I think, about 13 or 14 books of them. There was about 850, maybe 900 pages that I used. And again, I cut the spaces out between the roads, but not quite as much as I usually do. So some would have a lot cut out and some wouldn't have very much, maybe just a couple of cuts. And then I sort of strung them together with red thread. So the pages of that map is very yellow and orange. And then there's blue for the Thames River and any lakes. And then there's this really deep green for all the parks. And the colors are pretty consistent across the years and across the different pages and stuff. And I was really inspired by the window in the Hawthorne barn. It's like it's on a grid and it's huge and it's really sort of dominates the space. And every time I went in there, I was like, oh, the window. And I'd look at pictures and like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, the window, look at the window. So I used all these pages of the maps and strung them together with red thread. I'm not really sure exactly why I chose red. Red is not in those maps, so I didn't want to try and match a color because you'd never get it quite right. And then, red is, evocative of blood and life, and it just, I don't know, it just felt appropriate. So they were sort of strung up, and then they were tied at the top to trellises, and there was some of them went almost all the way to the floor, and some of them were just maybe 5 or 6 feet down, but they were really high up. So some of them had, I think, 13 pages in a strand, and others had as few as 5. And they were just sort of randomly spaced around in the trellises. And then when we hung them, there were 5 different trellises of different sizes, and they were hung at slightly different heights. And they sort of filled the space, but also created a smaller space in the middle. And this amazing thing happened where there was a slight breeze that came in through the door. So they just sort of wafted around very gently. And as people walked by, they moved. And I wasn't really expecting that. Like I couldn't practice with this in my house, and in my studio.
And also the public was invited to walk through
Yes,
them.
yeah.
So it was almost like walking through a forest of maps.
Yeah.
But the forest is very leafy and things move around. And you had this whole experience of looking through maps.
Yeah.
Not necessarily looking at them, but looking through them. And it was beautiful. And then you had all the cutouts on the floor.
Yes.
So it almost
I keep
looked like
all my offcuts. I keep every offcut I have, but those ones, yes, did end up in
almost
the
like
installation.
it had snowed, or these maps had, naturally shed parts off.
So I felt like they sort of ended up like leaves, which when you look through the window, there's all these trees out there, and it just sort of felt like it really fit, And I didn't, like, it looked way better than I was expecting. So it was really thrilling to see it when it was up.
Yeah.
And they let me sleep there one night. They have a bedroom that the artist can stay in. And I woke up super early the next morning, about 5 a.m. The sun was coming in through this little tiny window in the bedroom. And I was like, oh, I'm so tired. I just need to go back to sleep. And then I thought, oh, you should go in the room and see, is the sun coming in through there? And it was spectacular. And I sat there for about 3 hours and just watched as the sun rose up through there. And it was all orange and red, and just the light was changing every few minutes. And it was just amazing. And I wouldn't have had that if I hadn't stayed. So I tell everyone who's an artist there, like, stay the night and get up early and see how your art looks.
I imagine the sun was also throwing all these shadows all around.
Yeah, everywhere.
It was like, Calder has mobiles. When we think of mobiles or mobiles, we think of Calder. It was almost the same sort of thing, but with maps and hanging all over. You had this whole immersive experience of walking through maps.
Yeah, it was great. And I loved how some people were very, very careful about walking around it and very careful not to touch anything. And other people just walked straight through, like parted the ways there. And I loved that.
Do you think you have more of these immersive experiences coming up?
Yeah, I would love to be just an installation artist. That's what I really, really want to do. I want to take, hundreds of nautical charts and make something that's like under the sea, and take hundreds of something else and do something else with it. I just don't know how you sort of make a living doing that.
Yeah, that's always a big conundrum.
And I am really driven to cut the maps, and sometimes I only have one of them. So then there's only going to be one piece of art, and it's not necessarily going to be big enough to hang up somewhere. So,
well, when you do a show at the Commons next year, maybe you can
do something along those
like
lines.
that.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping maybe.
So, do you have any other shows coming up? You talked about the Commons. Or
well,
any
I'm hoping to have one at the Commons. I don't know yet for sure.
We won't tell anyone.
Well, but I'm hoping to. Yes, I had a show at the Commons a couple of years ago, and that was really great. I really enjoyed it. So yes, I'm hopeful.
And do you show elsewhere outside of Provincetown? Do you have? Do you send to other invitational shows, or do you show in other galleries?
I've got a real block about having to ship stuff because what I make is not tiny usually, and it's quite heavy with the acrylic and the panels and stuff, and it's sort of hard to pack. And I sort of like, I'm always like, I should be in that show in Portland, Oregon that's about journeys. I should do that. And then I'm like, I just didn't get around to it. It feels too hard or something. I don't know. Maybe now that I will be dedicating pretty much full time to art making and stuff, I do want to apply to other things beyond. I was part of a show in Boston a few years ago. Well, it was during COVID, so it ended up being a bit sad, but there was 3 artists that were in that show, and that was a really nice experience. But of course, hardly anybody came because it was in October of COVID. So
we should have workshops in this town on packaging and shipping art.
Yeah, we should.
It's a big skill that we have to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have a gallery, so I've been doing it for 8 years now, but still sometimes I just don't know how to approach these things.
Yeah.
It's and you have stuff that's not necessarily standard size.
Right.
Sometimes it's not a rectangle or a square. Right. It has all these things.
The bit sticking out.
The big sticking out.
And they can be quite fragile. I mean, if you banged it the wrong way, you could definitely break the acrylic pieces.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we'll try to be more careful with them. And do you feel like in time, or maybe now that you'll have more time to work, that your art might evolve in different directions?
I'm sure it'll always be maps, and essentially I will always be cutting the spaces out between the roads. But I already have different sort of ideas that I want to explore. I kind of get bored quite quickly. So, I'll make like whatever I made, 7 or 8 of the books with all the pages in there. And then I'm like, okay, explored that enough now. Now, what else can I do? Well, maybe I'll, put them in pieces of acrylic, and they're all standing in like a freestanding piece of art. And then I do those for a while, and then okay, I'm bored with this now. Now what should I do? And then I think, I've got some acrylic left. What about if they're built up on a panel? What about if they're hanging off the edge? And I always think like making art is, it's kind of like answering the question, like, what would it look like if you cut all the spaces out between the roads, but left the pages in the book? Well, you don't know until you do it, and then you see what it looks like. And so what would it look like if you cut the spaces out, but sandwich them between acrylic and have them hanging off the edge? Oh, look, cool shadows, So I have a few ideas of what to do with them next when I get bored of doing them the way I am now. So.
And do you want people to bring maps to you?
Oh, yes, always, yes. You can just reach me through my website, which is sianrobertsonart.com.
Well, you will have to spell that, though.
Oh, yes, it's Sian.
It's not a regular Sean.
Well, if you live in Wales, it's very regular. It's practically, it's the same as Jane. So it's a very, very common name in Wales.
So what is your website?
sianrobertsonart.com.
Okay. And are you also on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I sort of forget to post, and then I go through a flurry of doing it, and then I forget again for a while and stuff. So
yeah, so anybody who wants to bring you piles of maps.
Yeah. Oh, and people do, Yeah. I've got a whole lot of nautical charts from the Baker House in Wellfleet that I really want to do some sort of installation with, because the new owners found them all in the attic and just called me up and said, "Do you want these?" And I was like, "Sure." I always take them. If I don't want to use them, I can put them in Swap Shop or something. Although sometimes then people bring them back to me. They're like, I found these at the Swap Shop. Oh, yeah, I put them there because they're, I don't know, too glossy or something.
Yeah.
But yes.
Where can people see your art? Your website? Is there other places where they can see it?
Well, whenever I'm having shows. So if, there's a show at the Commons, it's opening this weekend, and I think it's up for a few weeks.
Yeah, it will be on, I think, until the end of January.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
quite a long time then.
Mhm.
Yes. So I'll have a piece in there. That's a piece of Washington, D.C. and my website, and yeah, just whenever, or if they want to come and see what I've got currently, they can.
And at the Christmas market.
Yeah, and at the Christmas market
Yeah.
too right now. So
Yeah. So if you want to see some art that is unusual, that stands out, that is not like anything you've seen before, I urge you to look for the art of Sian Robertson. Before we go, I want to remind you that if you'd like to contact us here at the Art Colony Podcast, you can do so at with our email, theartcolonypodcast@gmail.com, all of that with no spaces. You can also follow us on Instagram at the Art Colony Podcast. And if you want, you can leave us a tip, because I do this for free. My producer does this for free. And it's the holidays coming up. So if you'd like to give us a little tip and support the podcast, you can do so at buymeacoffee.com. And when you go there, you look for the Art Colony Podcast, or buymeacoffee.com/the Art Colony Podcast. And I want to thank Mike and Joey and Thomas, who have already given us tips on buymeacoffee.com. So thank you very much, Sian Robertson, for joining us today.
thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
And I wish you very happy holidays.
You too.
And thank you all for joining us as well.